and welcome to today's Career Development Series webinar, Key Strategies for Managing Life and Work During Coronavirus. The ABA Career Development Series is a monthly webinar series that contains practical tips on job search and professional development issues for seasoned and newer lawyers alike. The Career Development Series is brought to you by the ABA Career Center. The ABA Career Center offers both career development resources and a job board where you can upload your resume for employers to search and create job alerts based on your search preferences. All this and more is accessible at ambar.org/careers. Our moderator today is Suzanne Aronowitz. Suzanne is a senior consultant with Naomi Beard and Associates and a career coach specializing in supporting lawyers in their professional development and career transitions. In addition to her private coaching work, Suzanne has been a featured speaker for bar associations, delivers a program to guide law school graduates in their post-bar job search, and is included on the Diversity Lab's new site, Top Lawyer Coaches. She previously served as the Associate Dean for Law Career Services and Alumni Relations at Golden Gate University School of Law, where she also served as an adjunct professor and founder of Golden Gate's Law and Leadership Program. Suzanne has been a frequent presenter at NALP's annual education conference and Newer Professionals Forum. Suzanne, I'll let you take it from here.
Great, thanks, Tracy. Today, our panelist is Simorn Selim, the CEO and Creative Joy Director of Career Unicorns. Simorn has successfully worked with over 1,000 clients to land dream jobs, get promotions, negotiate raises, and build a book of business. Prior to her current role, Simorn was a career coach with Coca-Cola Scholars Foundation and UC Berkeley Next Opportunity at Work Conference. She has been a presenter at Google, Microsoft, Dress for Success, NALP, Paul Hastings, Wilson Sonsini, Hanson Bridget, and Farella Braun Martel. Simorn is the author of Belonging, Self-Love Lessons from a Workaholic, Depressed Insomniac Lawyer, which is available on Amazon. I want to welcome Simorn, and I'll turn it over to you to introduce today's agenda.
Thanks so much for the kind introduction, Suzanne. And I want to take a chance here to thank the ABA Career Center as well as its staff members for putting together this program really quickly in response to the coronavirus and what is changing on a rapid basis daily. And last but not least, I want to thank all of you for signing up and being here for yourself. During this time of frenzy, I know it's really easy and tempting to look at your phone first thing and watch the news and read all these articles, which is important to be informed, but also can feed to the frenzy. So what we want to set as an intention for this particular program is to create a safe space where all of us can acknowledge that it is a very scary time because things are changing, and changes, even when they're good changes, can be scary, and that is almost always a natural reaction for humans to respond to something like this. And we know that the coronavirus is a virus that is impacting not just the US, but everyone globally, and it does not discriminate on class, race, or gender. So no matter where you are in life, it's going to have an impact. And there's also a lot of career as well as economic impact. And so we hope that we can discuss these issues in a safe format where it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling, and at the same time also provide some key strategies for you to focus on what is in your control and to let go of what might not be in your control. So for today's program agenda, we are going to discuss daily self-care practices, which is absolutely in your control, strategies for dealing with stress, anxiety, and depression, and networking in a virtual world, because the things that we rely on, like going to meet people at bar association events or at meetups or at weddings or birthdays, those things are going to be paused for some time, and everybody is hopeful that things will get better in the next 2 to 3 weeks, but we don't know. And so I think in this world, it's going to take some time for us to all get used to networking virtually, because the world is still going to move forward. And fortunately for all of us, technology is in place where we can utilize it in a way to make sure that you can still continue to do the work that you want to do, to continue to connect with family and friends and colleagues in a way that's still meaningful. And then we're also going to talk about strengthening your skills in preparation for a new economy. I graduated in 2009 when the economy hit a recession, and things were really tough then. And I know what it's like to basically feel like you're at the bottom of the barrel. I didn't have the best grades in law school, and I was dealing with some depression because my dad had just died, and it was a really tough time in my life, and feeling like I was really stretched in terms of trying to find a job, especially when I didn't really have a built-in network because I grew up really poor. My parents were refugees from Laos. They didn't speak English. You know, we grew up on welfare, and my parents are those people who were picking cans from the garbage just to make ends meet. So to go from that and then land a job at a big law firm was an incredible journey, one that required a lot of self-doubt, a lot of beating myself up for, you know, why am I stupid, or I don't really belong here, having a lot of imposter syndrome, and strategies on how to overcome that. So we're going to discuss all of that in a very candid and vulnerable way. Some of the things mentioned here might be triggering, so I just want to flag that about depression, possibly, you know, suicidal thoughts, things like that that may come up during this really stressful time, particularly if you have mental illnesses as well. But again, the intent is a good intent to hold a safe space, to acknowledge that it's a scary time, and to also reaffirm that we are all in this together. The ABA is here for you, myself is here for you, Suzanne is here for you, Tracy and other members of the ABA staff is here for you, and hopefully everybody on this call is here with the good intent to have good energy around this particular program. We also want to recognize that we only have an hour for the program, so we'll be moving pretty rapidly through it, but we do want to make it interactive. So feel free to type in your questions into your question box, and Suzanne will moderate them throughout the program as well as at the end of the program. Suzanne and I have also discussed that if needed, we will stay on longer than the hour, even though we know that some people might have to drop off, mainly because if you have questions, we want to make sure that we are here to be serving as a support system for you. And at the end, I'll also share how you can stay in touch with me or email me directly or connect with me on LinkedIn. I will do my best to answer everybody's questions and take time to provide whatever I can because I've been doing work around career transitions, leadership development, and mindfulness, as well as productivity for the last 15 years. And so it's a built-in muscle that I have, but I recognize that not everybody has been preparing for the last 15 years for something like this. So without further ado, we'll jump right into self-care, daily self-care practices that you can have. And the first daily self-care practice that I want to review is mindfulness practices. And if whoever's moving the slides can move on to the next slide, that would be really great. So breathing, exercising, and walking. These are things that you can still do even with shelter in place. You know, if you don't want to go outside, you can walk around your house up and down the stairs. If you feel like you can't go to the gym, which I don't think any gym is open right now, you can easily put on an app or go on YouTube and work out. I work out every day, 30 minutes to the Body Project, which includes lunges and squats, and it's easy. I just choose this exact same video because I don't like to have to make a lot of decisions in the morning, and it's something that works for me. And I live near a park that has a lake, and so I go there, and our park is not populated. There's maybe 5 people, and the park is just as big as Golden Gate Park, if not bigger, so it's really nice. And the last thing that we all do on a daily basis is breathing, but many of us forget how to breathe, especially in times of anxiety, because we're so anxious that we're breathing from our chest and not from a diaphragm. So if it's okay with you, Suzanne, I love to take this moment to help bring everybody to the present and the now. And what I love for everybody to do is if you're sitting down, to have your feet grounded on the floor, or if you're standing up, to also have your feet grounded on your floor. We all can take a little bit of time to do that. And I want everybody to close your eyes. And even if you don't believe in mindfulness or breathing, let's just try it together, because what's the harm, right? It's going to take us less than 30 seconds to do this together. So if you can close your eyes, and I want you to breathe in deeply through your nose. And as you're breathing in through your nose, to raise your shoulder, and then breathe out through your mouth and let your shoulders drop. And let's try that a few more times. And now I want you to put your right hand on your heart and your left hand on your belly. And just to continue breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth for a few more breaths. And if you're breathing correctly, you should feel your belly rise and fall. And that's why we put one hand on the belly. and not feel your chest rising and falling. Because if you're feeling your chest rising and falling, that means you're having too shallow of a breath, and that's usually from anxiety and likely going to increase your cortisol hormones, which will increase stress. So just continue to breathe for a few more breaths, touching your heart and chest as well as your belly. And I want you to take your last breath and gently open your eyes. How did that feel for you, Suzanne?
Good, and it's something that I've been trying to focus on because I tend to hold my breath. I think it's true for a lot of us, a lot of lawyers. We tend to hold our breath when we're stressed, and so just paying attention. And throughout the day, I'll try to remind myself I need to breathe. It's something so simple, but it makes a huge difference. Just getting that oxygen flowing and I think for us to invest even these few, these 30 seconds into breathing or exercising or walking, it's so important to take care of ourselves. I think getting regular sleep is another aspect of this, but the more we can do to boost our own immune system, to take care of our wellness, the better equipped we will be to take care of all those who rely on us, whether it's our clients, our coworkers, our significant others, our children. We need to be resourceful for ourselves and for all of them. So it may seem silly, but I think these small investments go a long way.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, absolutely. There's a study that shows that 1 minute of breathing daily in the way that we breathe or we're breathing is actually more effective than doing 1 10-minute meditation a week. So there's something about making this a practice and something about doing it consistently and having compounding impact. And if others in the audience are feeling that this is helpful, we'd love to hear you share in the chat box. You could just type in, yes, it's helpful. And what I would invite you to do, as Suzanne has done, is to make this a daily practice first thing in the morning. Instead of checking your phone or checking the news, do the breathing. It'll help you calm down. Anytime you're feeling anxious or nervous, do the breathing. It'll help you get grounded. It's a very easy, cheap, free way to do things, and it doesn't cost that much time. If you're finding that your mind is spiraling and you're super busy and you're just like, I can't get myself to stop thinking, what I would recommend there is to actually do 25 jumping jacks right away and then do the breathing. Because what that does is it cuts your mind from thinking because you're too focused on the exercise. So it brings your energy up and breaks that cycle of thinking and then allows you to ground yourself through the breathing. And I saw somebody type in that they found that exercise relaxing. And as you can see, it didn't take very long. It was less than 30 seconds for us to do the breathing together. So I invite you to do more of that. The second thing to really help yourself with daily self-care practices is building routines and sticking to them. When I started working at home by myself, everybody thought it was great. Like I literally work 10 hours a week. I only take on 2 clients a month, 2 private clients that I coach one-on-one, and then 1 to 2 speaking engagements per month. And then I also have some corporate gigs that I do where I do trainings over a longer period of time with different career labs for different corporations, usually in the Silicon Valley or at large law firms and medium-sized law firms, and starting to see a little bit more with startups and smaller law firms as well. And everybody thinks it's a dream life, right? Because you work 10, 20 hours a day, you kind of have time to do whatever. But what that can easily fall into is that you don't shower every day, you can be in your PJs, which is really fun for, say, like the first 3 to 5 days. And then after that, it's kind of disgusting because you didn't shower. And then also, it just doesn't feel good because you don't feel like you're part of society and part of life. And so if you've never had an experience where you're working remotely, this is a huge change. And so what I would recommend is to build a routine. For me, I recently was diagnosed with bipolar 2 and had been misdiagnosed for the last 10 years with clinical depression. And for those of you who don't know about bipolar 2 or do know about it but might have some misinformation, it's actually a very terrifying and scary experience for the person going through it, because the cycle is you have hypomania where you have profound productivity. Like I wrote a book in 5 days, I'm writing more books, etc. I can work on like 20 projects. People don't know how to get things done, but it's because you have this extreme amount of energy, you don't sleep, and you're just going, and it's almost like you're on a high, but you're not on drugs, you're just on a high because it's part of your illness. Then you crash and become really irritable and angry and do things that are out of character that could ruin both your personal and professional relationships. And Suzanne knows I've had to walk the walk of saying sorry, I messed up, and I understand if you don't ever want to talk to me again, and I have to accept that some people will never forgive me or want me back in their lives, but I also have to acknowledge that it was a time in my life where I couldn't control what was going on because it's a mental illness, and I have to own my behavior and own the consequences of those behavior, and also move forward in my life, because I can't live in the past, which was where I was most of last year, in deep regret, depression, and suicidal thoughts, where every single minute of my waking life, which was about 22 hours a day, I did not want to live because the pain was so severe that I just couldn't imagine living anymore. And I don't know if anybody on this call is experiencing that. What I do know is that Mental Health America came out about studies saying that people who have a mental illness like myself are 30% more likely to be susceptible for another episode. And so for me, building the routine for me means I go to bed at 9:30, which means I turn off all my electronics by 9. That includes my phone, my emails, everything. I remove all of my electronics and put it in the laundry room. It's basically, I cannot see it or find it because I'm a workaholic, so I have to save myself for myself. I go to bed at 9:30. Sometimes I can't fall asleep, but it's still a practice to do that. And then I wake up at around 5:30. I meditate. I do my 30-minute workout using one YouTube video. I meditate with Deepak and Oprah on their 21-day meditation challenge. I buy them after I do them and use them throughout the year. And then the app comes with a journal, and then I do my journaling, and that's my hour routine every single morning. And then I shower immediately after that. And if possible, I will build in a walk, in the morning, but I make sure that I get out for a walk at least 2 times a day, because if not, I can tell that, I'm not in my best shape. And for me, it's not an option. It's actually a lifeline, right? Because I was in suicidal, depressive thoughts for so long. I know that if I don't take care of myself, I will get back there. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. If I don't do my practices, then I will be in a bad place. And I'm happy to say that after a month of medication, I'm medication free. And I'm only able to do that because I have these very built-in deep routines. Other things that I've done is remove toxic people from my life. The person who is sort of your friend, but you're not sure, who shows up and you're like, oh, I don't feel good. That might not be somebody you want to see right now. Maybe it's not forever, but if you don't have capacity to deal with them, that person might be your mom or your sister too. And so just being very vigilant about building your own self-care practices and sticking to them and not being apologetic for it, because this is just a time where you need to own that there's a lot going on, not just in your own energy, but energy across the US as well as across the world globally, which can have a really big impact on how you feel. And so it's self-care practices and routines are even more important.
Simone, I wanted to jump in just on the
Yeah.
building routines, especially for folks who suddenly find themselves making the transition from working in an office where perhaps they had a commute and and then they would return home at the end of the day, and now they're finding they're in one space all day long, not really leaving because we can't go anywhere, and that creates its own stress and discomfort for folks. So I think that some of those routines and rituals are really important in terms of productivity. And so one thing I will recommend to some of my clients is set a specific time when you're, do all those activities Simone mentioned, the exercise, the mindfulness, all of that, and then figure out, when does your workday start? And have a specific time when you start your workday, and a specific time when you end your workday. And I even suggested to someone I was speaking with who lives in a tall apartment building, and so she can't really go in and out as easily. So step out on your balcony at the end of your workday so that you can return home, right? So if there's a way to step on your front porch, step outside, and then come back home to have that experience of returning home at the end of the day, even though you may have been located in that space all day long. I also find I do work from home That's my status quo. And so I have found time blocking to be incredibly helpful. So allocating certain activities to certain times of day. So maybe you only check email at a certain time of day, or certain times of day, or when you do your deep think, if you have to write a brief, or, things that require uninterrupted time. And then maybe at other points in the day, that's when you're doing check-in calls with colleagues, or reaching out, or doing your emails. And just figuring out when to do those activities so that there's some definition, you have some control, and you can get things done. We are noticing that some employers have a sense that because everyone's home, that they must be available all the time, and that there's been a bit of an intrusion where you might be getting requests for meetings and emails and calls at maybe 7 in the morning, when before you wouldn't have been involved in those activities until 9 or 10 in the morning. And so finding ways to set some boundaries at a time when we don't feel as much differentiation in our day can be very helpful.
Yeah, I love that, Suzanne, and echo what Suzanne says about having block times, knowing when you're starting and ending the day. Having that physical stepping out and stepping back in is really important. And having healthy boundaries is super duper important. I'm having to have a lot of those conversations, and it's uncomfortable, but it's totally important and necessary. And we had a question come in where a student asked that she usually studies on campus and library, but now that's changed in suggestions for making home a place more conducive to work. And this was another point that I wanted to make, was to carve out a space for yourself to actually work and to only leave all of your work items there. So for me, we are not equipped to have two full-time working people work at home. And so what I did was I converted the laundry room into my office space. And yeah, it's kind of weird to have laundry everywhere, but that's the only space I can hide from my husband and from my son, and I have a no boys allowed, and that's what I need. Other people might use their closet. So, just finding a designated space where this is where you work, and then you can physically remove yourself from the studying and from the work is going to be super duper important. You don't need a huge amount of space. It's just carving out a corner in the wall, and you could even put up small things like curtains or cardboard just to make it seem like it's a different space, so that you can have what Suzanne mentioned earlier, this physical separation. And then the third thing I wanted to talk about was carving out time for yourself. As Suzanne mentioned, it's easy for employers and others to say, hey, you're going to be available all the time because you have your iPhones, your Blackberries, internet, email, social media, so you're always supposed to be on. In my particular company, we use Slack, and so it's kind of like a chat box for those that don't know, and everybody expects that you're just going to understand every conversation that's going on, and that's not the case at all. And for most of us, even though we might complain about the commute, that's also a time for us to decompress. And I found that, my walk to and from the BART, which is about half an hour each way, was my time to decompress or listen to a podcast or meditate. And I didn't have that. And so I need to actually carve out that time, because I'm not used to being, with people all the time and being expected for every minute. If I'm not on meetings or calls, which I have 12 to 15 meetings a day already, that I'm just going to be right back into being mommy or wife or sister or daughter or whatever role you have to play. So it's really important for you to carve out that time, even if it's just 10 minutes to walk around the block by yourself, or to listen to a podcast, or to, my favorite thing is to read a book or read the New Yorker. And so that is something that you have to put in your calendar, because the last person you prioritize is almost always yourself. And so if you don't calendar it, it won't get done. And the last thing I'd say is disconnect from the news and social media. And that might be hard because you're in social isolation and social distancing. So you're like, oh, this is my way to connect. But there's a way in which you can connect that is positive, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in networking in a virtual world. And there's a way where you connect where it's destructive. And for those of people who first thing in the morning, you're checking your phone for the news, and then you're watching the news cycle, and it doesn't matter if you're watching CNN or Fox or any other news cycle, they're constantly repeating the same thing over and over. It's a pandemic, there's a recession, people are fighting, and that kind of news is important to be aware of on a larger level, but not conducive to you, because a lot of these issues are things that are outside of your control and not something that you can do. Things that you can do that are in your control, for example, my husband and I, we have somebody that comes to clean our house once a month because we have a 21-month-old and there's no way I could deep clean the bathroom or blah, 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 and I just need a little bit of help. And we texted our person to be like, hey, we know that with social distancing, it might be hard for you to find work. Would it be helpful for us to send you an advance of 3 months? And then when things get better, you can come and clean the house whenever. And she was like, thank you so much. That's going to cover 2 months of my groceries. And I remember what that's like growing up on welfare and not having enough to eat. So I am glad that I'm in a place where we can do that. Or, with our home daycare provider, they are not a large corporation. And so some parents are opting to not pay full tuition because they're closed. But we are at a place where, we can still pay tuition. Sure, it's a lot of money and it would be nice to save it, but we know that by not paying them, they're going to go out of business. And so these are small things that are in control that allows us to be able to act with kindness and compassion and really know that where our money and our time is going, it's making a meaningful impact. And so I would encourage you during this time, as scary as it is, to recognize that there's still things that you can do to make the world a better place and to focus on that, because having hope, having compassion, and having grace is really what we need a lot more of in today's world. And
Yeah, I was just going to say some more, and I love the idea of kind of limiting the news and social media, maybe pick 1 or 2 trusted sources and maybe 1 or 2 specific times of day when you will check them. But that cumulative effect of hearing the same thing over and over is really detrimental, and it can lead to a lot of overwhelming stress and anxiety. And I know that you've already shared some of your tips and suggestions and some of your own experiences for dealing with some, pretty heavy duty issues, but I'm wondering, maybe if we can move on to some of these other strategies for dealing with stress and anxiety
Yeah,
during the current
absolutely.
situation.
Those are good points. And for those who want a good overview, I find the Morning Brew and the Skim to be really good compilations for news, but not be overly dramatic. And yeah, I definitely agree. We should move on to strategies for dealing with stress, anxiety, and depression. Some key tips overall are acknowledge and accept your feelings. If you're feeling afraid, I'm not going to tell you don't be afraid. Elizabeth Gilbert has this really powerful talk that she gives on Insight Timer, where she says fear has been her friend for the longest time. And whenever you hear someone say, don't be afraid, it's going to be okay, she feels like punching the person. That's usually her natural reaction. And that's true, because that's invalidating your feelings and dismissing your feelings. And there's no need for that in today's world, to pretend to be brave. It's okay to say it's a scary time. There's a lot of change coming. We don't know the impact yet. We're starting to hear some things, but at the same time, recognizing that you can acknowledge and accept your feelings, and you can also tell your feelings that you're going to take a break from them. Meaning, one recommendation I give to a lot of clients is, if you are feeling overly anxious, just find a time in the day, like a 30-minute block or an hour block, where you're just going to allow yourself to either talk out your feelings or write out your feelings, and then leave the rest of the day to be productive with doing your meetings or writing your briefs or building time or whatever it is that you need to do, or studying for school. And when those anxious feelings or thoughts come up, you can let them know, hey, you know what? I totally get that you want to talk right now, but I'm in the middle of something and we have an appointment at 8 p.m. to discuss your feelings. And it sounds really silly, but having that really allows people to know that they are going to address those things, because what you resist will persist. So it's important to acknowledge it and accept it, but also to still continue to find ways to be productive.
Yeah. And I would encourage us to give ourselves a little bit of grace. I mean, this is an overwhelming time, and we are all being asked to do things differently. And it may not be as perfect as it normally is. And for those of you who might be managing teams remotely or being managed remotely, you might be homeschooling your children right now while also practicing law or going to law school. I mean, it's overwhelming, and we may not be operating at our optimal best, and that's okay. We're all doing the best that we can under these circumstances. And so I think to give yourselves a little bit of grace during these trying times, and to extend that to the people around you, can also be helpful. And just to recognize that big change brings about big emotions, and it is normal to feel stressed out right now. And as Simorn said earlier, to focus on the things that are within your control, and to acknowledge those feelings can be really helpful.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love the idea of giving grace. I actually meditate to Deepak and Oprah's meditation challenge around grace. And And they have a 21-day meditation challenge that just started this Monday, and they keep 5 days available. So if you want to start today, it's still there. Day one is still there, and it's free. They started this in response to coronavirus and how we can still have hope in a time of stress. So I highly recommend it. There's also an app called Calm where you can get some free meditations, or you can just do what we did earlier, which is breathing. I see that Hillary says that your ideas are already feeling helpful. Thank you. Glad to hear that. We definitely want to make this something that you can implement immediately. Other things you can do is the daily self-care practices, which we mentioned in an earlier slide. I would also strongly suggest that you get advice from a professional, even if you feel quote unquote fine or okay, because this is a very challenging time and there's a lot of emotions that many of us are suppressing or just trying to keep it together because there's so much going on. BetterHelp.com is listed as the top 10 resource and many articles, and it's great because it's $40 to $75 a session. Everybody on there is licensed, they follow HIPAA laws, and if you use Super Soul as a code word, courtesy of Oprah, you can get a 10% discount. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and I also want to encourage folks to check in with your state bar. Most state bars have a lawyer assistance program, and so you might be entitled to access some free or low cost mental health services just by virtue of being in the legal profession. I know here in Oregon, we have a fantastic attorney assistance program, and so I would encourage you to check to see what's being offered by your state bar.
Yeah, that's a great thing to mention, Suzanne. Many state bars do have that, and there's also the Lawyers Depression Project, which Joe Milowick of Quinn Emanuel helped co-found, and he came out about his depression a while back, and they started this last year. And so if anybody wants to sign up, it's a nonprofit, it's free, and you can sign in anonymously. So there's no need to reveal who you are. If you want to share who you are, that's okay as well. Howard mentioned that if you have a dog, play with him or her. Most dogs love it, and I think that's great. Dogs are good therapy. I know a lot of law schools bring dogs around during finals, and they do work. And lastly, I would say connect with friends and family on a regular basis using the technology that we have. Obviously, if you have elderly parents or grandparents, you don't want to be interacting with them at this time because they're the most vulnerable population. So use things like FaceTime, Google Hangout, Zoom, Messenger, WhatsApp, whatever it is that you need to use in order to connect with your family, whether it's locally or internationally. There are tools now that you can use on a regular basis to still develop meaningful relationships and still be able to quote unquote see each other, even if you're not physically in the same room.
Yeah, and I also think, at this time when we're all feeling kind of disempowered by, these larger events happening in the world, that, to focus on things where we can contribute to others and help others can also help us while helping them. And so, if you are capable of maybe doing food shopping for people in your life or in your community who are immunocompromised, calling people, as Simone said, here in Oregon, I saw that there was an effort to write letters to residents in nursing homes, who might be feeling isolated and scared right now. There's a big call out for blood donations. As someone said too, paying it forward to your favorite businesses. So not only your daycare providers, but purchasing gift cards from your favorite, independent bookstore or restaurant, to make sure that they have some cash flow to maintain their businesses. But doing those things will help you feel better and that you're doing something that's contributing, and that they're win-win solutions.
Absolutely. I love that, Suzanne, because it's really in line with what we want to focus on today, which is that even in times of crises, there are things that you can do in your power to make the world a better place, and encouraging you to focus on that rather than the crazy frenzy of the news cycle. And Hillary also mentioned that there's another meditation app called Headspace that has both free and subscription choices. And I've used that before, and I think the guy is Australian. So it's a interesting app, and it has a lot of infographics that are super helpful. So that's also another good meditation tool that you can use that's easily accessible over your phone or over your computer, as long as you have the internet, which I think everybody here does because you're on a webinar. And I think that segues into our next topic around networking in a virtual world. I know Many people are very stressed out about, well, what I do for networking, especially for law students who are graduating. Not only are you not sure if you're going to have graduation, you're also wondering, like, how am I going to network and get a job, which is traditionally what career services offer or recommend. And then, even for people who are now dealing with potential layoffs or potential career changes, depending on where you are in your career, I understand that's a very anxious time. I've worked with over, as Suzanne mentioned earlier, over 1,000 people, students all the way to VPs, executives, and CEOs and presidents of different companies. And everybody is feeling nervous and anxious about their careers. And that makes a lot of sense. I was actually talking to a PhD economist, and she's like, I don't know why people are so worried about the financial situation. I was like, yeah, because shutting down countries, not just the US, but countries for 3-4 weeks is going to have a huge global impact. And we are, in a recession, and I think it was going to get worse before it gets better. And that's often how these kinds of things happen, right? But then the good news is that we've all been through, trauma before, whether it's 9/11 or the recession of 2008, and it was a tough time, but it's still possible to be able to find a job. It's still possible to build a career that you're happy with. And I, recently just worked with 2 clients who landed a few offers last Friday at really great companies like Walmart Labs. So it's not as if jobs aren't out there, but there is a different way in which you have to hustle and be a lot more aggressive in looking for your job. So some things you can do is sign up for events online like you did here. Reach out to panelists to connect with them on LinkedIn or via email, like myself or Suzanne. I'll share my personal information on the question slide, and I'm sure Suzanne would be happy to connect with you as well. You can ask organizers if other attendees are willing to share their emails. Last week, I did an event with Dropbox, Stripe, and Rabble and Pathrise on how to support people returning to work, which it's going to have a huge impact on those people, whether they've taken time to take care of their mental illness, to take care of elderly parents or ill family members, or taking time off just because they're burnt out, or if they're a parent. Traditionally, those are the people that have a harder time coming back to work because recruiters are afraid of their resume gaps. And if any of you are in that position, let me know. I'm happy to email you a recording of that particular talk as well. But we are, emailing the attendees to say, hey, typically we have a reception for this event, but given social distancing, we're not able to do that. Are you willing to share your emails? And if you say yes, we'll email it to the whole group. And so some people can say no, and that's totally fine. It's totally up to you, but that's something that you can ask the organizers to do, or if you're an organizer in an event, you can ask attendees to do that as well. You can also email, call people in your existing network to deepen your connections. I think sometimes when people are networking, you're thinking, I need to meet new people, but what studies show is actually the best success is to connect with people who are quote unquote considered weaker ties. So people maybe that you've met once or twice, but you haven't really followed up with. This is the time to look through your LinkedIn database, your Facebook friends, or your Instagram group, or whatever network you're using. I hear TikTok is really big. I still don't understand what it is or get it, but my 12-year-old niece says that it's really hip and that I'm too old to understand. So, but I heard that that's, a great place to connect as well. So whatever medium you're using, know that there's a way in which you can cultivate and deepen your relationships. For me, I read a lot, so I have like my own book club. I'm also, leading like a financial group for women of color and dealing with their finances. And so there's a whole bunch of ways in which you can still connect and learn and deepen your connections. And these kinds of connections can lead to a whole bunch of other opportunities as well. And if you are networking, conducting informational interviews, that's still possible. A lot of my clients are now doing it via Hangouts or Zoom. And it's actually better for a lot of my introverted clients. They like it. They can sit in their own office in the comfort of their own home and still see the person face to face, but not have to take a lot of time to go to the other person's office or to meet someone at a coffee shop and have the stress of like, am I going to get there on time? Or, what are they going to look like? Are they going to look like their picture on LinkedIn? So it can be a very helpful tool. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, Suzanne?
Yeah, no, I think for me the focus, as you said, is really on maintaining relationships. And so this is a good time to be reaching out to people, colleagues, former coworkers, former professors, former clients, just checking in. How are they? What's going on? Do they need anything? Just, maintaining those connections, finding ways to help others. If you read a helpful article that you think somebody else would appreciate, send it to them. Or if you see a cool, webinar, send it to that person to let them know. Find ways to continue adding value to the people in your network. Learn about what's going on with them. And just stay connected with people. Just because you're not seeing them face to face, as someone says, it doesn't mean you can't invest in those relationships. And you just have to be a little bit more creative with how you do it.
Absolutely. I love that, just thinking creatively about who you still want to touch base with, or it's a good opportunity to connect with people who might have been long lost friends or professors you wanted to update. I just sent an email to Robert Cole, who is at Berkeley Law School, and I was on the student admissions committee with him. And he was a professor, and we were touching base, and it's somebody that I haven't talked to in a year, but I really wanted to catch up with him. But sometimes life can get busy. So I think in this crisis, it might be a time to reflect and think about how to make it an opportunity to pause, to not feel like you have to rush the whole time, and to really think about how do you want to live your life, and how do you want to wake up feeling in your life, and allowing yourself to have that time as well. And that segues us into the next topic about strengthening your skills in preparation for a new economy. For a lot of people, a lot of my clients are really stressed out. Several of them have had layoffs already. We also know in this recession, more of that will be coming. In 2009, when I graduated, my firm laid off a lot of the mid-level associates. And so when I went to the firm, it was kind of a hostile work environment. I wouldn't say kind of, it was a hostile work environment. Not that anybody was mean purposefully. Well, there were a few people, but that aside, I think people were just mad that their friends were laid off. And here you are, a new person coming into a job that their friends should have. So there's going to be some challenges around that. And I would just remind us all to just act with compassion and grace, and understand that sometimes we're in situations that are out of our control. I cannot control the fact that a firm has decided to lay off mid-level associates and senior associates because they're huge cost centers, and to hire new associates that can bill very high rates and make more profit for them. And so I think just reminding yourself, regardless of whether you're in the shoes of being laid off, or in the shoes of the person who is watching your friend being laid off, or in the shoes of the person who's entering the job, to just have grace and compassion for each other, because this is a time where we need more of that. To increase your skills, you can take a lot of classes to increase your understanding of technology. For my older clients, and I know on this call, the RSVPs, we had over half of the 150 so people that RSVP'd for this program are 45 and above. And so if you're looking for ideas on career transitions, some things that you might need to update yourself on might be around technology. And this is not true across the board. If you're already working in a tech company, then you're probably ahead of the game. But if you were at a university like I was a while ago, I really had to learn new tools like Slack, like Salesforce, Airtable, and a whole bunch of other platforms when I transitioned into tech. And that was a really huge learning curve for me. And I imagine that's what people who didn't grow up with the internet or email felt like when that became like a thing, right? And so just reminding yourself that this is not new. Learning new technologies and tools is a part of life, and you've now learned how to use a cell phone or an iPhone. You've learned how to use email. It's very similar in terms of transferable skill set. It's just another platform, and you just have to get used to it. There's a lot of free courses on Coursera, YouTube. You can go to the Apple Store. They have a lot of workshops online. I went there and actually took a Mac 101 class because my sister has never used a Mac. I've used it before, but she was like, I just don't know how to transition from using a PC to a Mac. So we took her there, and she was like, wow, this was really great. It was really overwhelming. And my sister's not that old. She's really young. She's only 40. So if you're in that group, don't feel any shame. Just go get the help that you need. There's also a lot of courses on YouTube. It's helpful for people who can't cook like me on how to cut a chicken all the way to, how to code. And there's a lot of low-cost courses on Masterclass, Udemy, and Creative Live, and other resources. And then, of course, the ABA, PLI, your local bar associations, state bar associations, other professional associations that you're a part of will have online courses that you can take to help sharpen your skills. You can also sign up to work with a coach or a career consulting company like myself. With Career Unicorns, we help people in a variety of stages. I work one-on-one with clients who are either trying to develop leadership skills because they're in management and they're trying to make a jump, or they're trying to transition careers. I also do trainings for companies, anywhere from how to manage imposter syndrome, how to create more wellness within the work environment. And then there's an organization that I serve as career mentor with called Pathrise, and they help specifically people who want to do transition to tech jobs, whether it's product strategy or operations. And we're seeing a lot of lawyers transition into that area. And then there's also other organizations like Suzanne is with Naomi Beard and Associates, and Suzanne's also a coach herself. And so the ABA also works with Korn Ferry to provide some career coaching services. So don't feel like there's not options around there. Finding a job is a job in and of itself. It's also a very different skill set. So you might be the best lawyer, but you might be really not that great at finding a job. And that's okay, because it's a whole different skill set. I don't know if all law schools are providing alumni with career services, but I would encourage you to reach out to them and see if that's even possible, because it might be something that they're offering now given the current economic crisis and health crisis that's going on. Something else you can do. Oh, go ahead, Suzanne.
Well, I just want to say, like, right now, it's important to just build that resiliency around managing your career. And if you are looking for a job or find yourself looking for a job, this is a time when you can be doing things, and don't be surprised when future employers ask, hey, what did you do during this time? And so to show employers that you are resilient, that you're focused on learning and developing your skills, that you have found ways to stay active, that you have found ways to contribute to your professional community, all of that's going to be important. And I think you can learn about and help predict some of the areas where there will be some need. I mean, right now we're seeing a lot of need in labor and employment law issues, cybersecurity, force majeure clauses. And then you might predict, like, okay, well, where will we be in 3 months or 6 months? And to think about some of those practice areas and those skills, and what can you do now to bridge that gap if those are not areas where you have a lot of expertise. So restructuring, healthcare, tax, these are all areas where we expect to be seeing some activity. And so taking advantage of all those resources that Simorn just mentioned to bring yourself up to speed. Maybe if you like to write, I would encourage you to be writing articles that you can share with your professional community, publish on LinkedIn, become associated with that expertise and find ways to contribute. And that's going to be a great way to to help employers identify you as someone who is knowledgeable and someone they may want to bring to their organization. And I'll also say, in terms of the tech, we all have to get comfortable with the technology now, especially job interviews are moving completely online, at least for this little chunk of time. So getting comfortable with Zoom, getting comfortable with other kinds of video interviewing platforms, it's just going to help you do better in this process.
Yeah, I love that, Suzanne, of thinking about like the future where things are going to be in 3 to 6 months. Hard to predict, but there are some things that you can focus on. For example, while many companies and businesses are shut down, there are 11 to 12 exempted sectors across the nation, really, in telecommunications, in healthcare, in emergency care, consumer goods that are still growing. So, companies like Blue Apron, which was on its last leg, is now all of a sudden getting so much more usage and funding. DoorDash, Uber transportation is not doing so great, but Uber Eats is doing really well. So you just have to be strategic in actually predicting the market. And what I'm finding from the clients that I work with who are still getting jobs during this time is that we've been very proactive in not just applying for jobs that have been listed in the last week, but actually contacting companies that we know are so busy that they can't actually post jobs. And that's how several of my clients have actually landed offers in the last week or two, because we were really strategic about, hey, these are the markets that are growing. We know that they haven't posted jobs, but we suspect that they're probably going to need a whole bunch of people in legal and operations and insurance management, because those are areas that are growing so rapidly, they can't even find the time to hire people. So there are strategic ways of you reaching out to people to network, of thinking about that as a way to predict the future and also put yourself in a really good place if they are hiring but can't post jobs because they're too busy, or if they're planning to hire in a month or two when things quote unquote gets a little bit back to normal. And
Yeah,
Neil
and
said that,
oh,
I just
oh,
wanted to share
oh
that Neil
yeah, go
Sullivan
ahead.
said that, thank
Yeah.
you for your ideas and encouragement. You're welcome, Neil. Suzanne and I are happy to help. And you were going to say something else, Suzanne? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, and you know, not everyone on the call is looking for a job, right? Many folks are employed, and I would encourage you to find ways of adding value within your organization. So if you find that you have your practice area is a little slow, and you see your colleagues are overwhelmed because maybe they're in an area of law that is very busy right now, you know, find ways of adding value, find ways of pitching in. How can you bring yourself up to speed to lend a hand? You want folks within your organization to see you as a valuable contributor. Maybe you can help communicate with folks within your organization and keep people connected. You know, there may be ways of contributing in addition to the legal work you do that will help sustain the culture of the organization you work for. So, you know, stay connected, find ways of adding value and supporting your colleagues, and just becoming that trusted colleague within your organization.
I love that, Suzanne, because there's nothing more bulletproof or foolproof for keeping your job during this time than being valuable. And, you know, a good attitude and a team-oriented attitude goes a really long way. And then the last two things we've already talked about, which is take MCLE trainings and attend webinars. These are things that you can do for free in your own home, like you are doing right now. And so just encouraging you to continue to do that and to build connections with people that you meet through that as well. And I think that that wraps up the things that we were focused on talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add not only to take the trainings, but to deliver them. If you have expertise that would be helpful, that is a great way to share with your community and increase your profile. So offer, you know, talk to the providers in your community and offer to, you know, present an MCLE training that they can push out via webinar. That's a great way to build your own portfolio.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
idea. And even if you don't go through an organization, you can easily set an event on Eventbrite or on LinkedIn and ask people to RSVP. And then you can use something like Zoom, which has a free component, or Google Hangouts, which also has a free component to it, and, or Facebook Live even, or I'm seeing like Amy Cuddy and other people use Instagram Live. I don't know how to use Instagram. So, but there are a lot of tools that you can use to just, like Suzanne said, add value and raise your own profile and become an expert in an area that you're really interested in. And is there anything else you wanted to ask, Suzanne, before we move into Q&A?
Yeah, no, I was going to say those are all great suggestions, and I want to invite folks, if they have questions, to type them in, and we'd be happy to answer as many questions as we can.
Yeah, and while you're typing in your questions, like we said, we encourage you to write in. We're going to be here for you. If you have any questions, you're welcome to email me at my email, simorn@careerunicorns.com. I will respond to any question that will take less than 10 minutes to respond to. And if needed, I'm happy to hop on a quick 10 to 15-minute call as well. I will say that it's pretty busy every day. I'm having about 15 minutes or 15 meetings, but I'm happy to just try to squeeze things in because I want to be of service. And of course, the conversations would be free of charge. But if you want it to work together long term, we can talk about that. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's pretty easy to find me. I'm the only Simorn Slim I know, mainly because immigration made a mistake on my last name. So that's another long story, but you can send a message there. And then you can download, for those of you who are feeling, you know, fear and anxiety, my guide, Transform Your Career from Dread to Joy guide. It's a one-pager. It's not going to solve all your problems, but it will at least help you to kind of get grounded on what's causing the dread or anxiety. And somebody who took a webinar on Spark Your Career Joy, who downloaded this, said that it allowed her to dream again, that she felt like her soul was crushed and she was stuck in a career that she couldn't get out of. And the guide allowed her to have a space to actually write down what she was dreaming of that she didn't think was possible. And I think that's a great place to start, is allowing yourself to reflect on what it is that you want. And then the question isn't, can you get there? The question is, how do you do things to get there? Because there's always a way to get there. It just might take a little bit longer. It might be a different path. So just reminding yourself that everything is possible and to believe in the possibilities. You can also sign up for weekly articles at careerunicorns.com. I have not been writing articles on a regular basis, but my commitment starting next week in response to coronavirus is to write articles on how to invite more joy into your career and more love and compassion for yourself into your life and your career as well. Because I think at this time and point in the world, really, and in the universe, we need a lot more of that.
Yeah, and I'll add, I just typed my email address into the chat, and just like Simone, I'm happy to answer some quick questions and point you to resources for folks who are looking to work with a coach long-term. I'm happy to chat with you about what that looks like as well. And I noticed that Neil mentioned that the Small Business Administration is presenting a webinar on Friday about accessing loans and resources, including in the package that was just passed by the Senate. Are we familiar with how this applies to part-time hourly workers? I am not, but that's a perfect example of an area where you all can contribute. So if that's something that's interesting to you, I would go to that webinar. I would encourage you to read up as much as you can. And if you can digest that information quickly and disseminate it through your networks on LinkedIn, write here, top 10 things to know about the latest relief package, right? I mean, that could be a very useful tool for the folks in your community. So I think if you are finding that you have questions about what's going on in the world, that might be a good clue as to areas where you want to build up your expertise quickly, because others likely have the same question and you could deliver something that's quite valuable.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Neil, and thanks for those comments, Suzanne. I think there's a lot of laws and regulations that are being passed in response to the situation, and I don't think anybody really knows how it's going to impact people on a larger basis right now. I think we're all sort of trying to figure it out. So what I would say to that is to be patient and follow the news. The ABA has a lot of different sections to it, and I'm guessing that there's going to be people who are going to be presenting on this. So be on the lookout, especially if you're an ABA member, to see what's being provided. There is a page that Tracy will talk about more, where you can find more coronavirus specific information, and there's a lot of activity around that. There's also CLE being offered through that. So even if you're not part of the ABA, you can always sign up for the live event for free. It's just that the recordings are sent only to ABA members. And we've made some special exceptions for that. For example, the webinar on coping strategies with depression, anxiety, and stress, we opened it up to the public because we thought that that was really important. I think this one might be one that they would open up to it, but that's up to the ABA to decide. So I'd say follow the different sections that are focused on employment law, and be patient, because I think we're all just trying to sort out what the laws actually are and how it's actually going to impact people when it comes down and trickles down.
Yeah, and so there's some questions. There's a question about the ABA Wellness Pledge. And I know there's quite a bit of information on the ABA's website about the Wellness Pledge, and that's something that's done in partnership with lots of legal employers around the country. There are specific elements to that pledge that those legal employers commit to in terms of creating an environment for their folks that supports wellness. I don't know that I can say much more than that, but there's quite a bit of information on the ABA's website. So I don't know if you have a specific question about the Wellness Pledge. And then there was a question about spelling the speakers' names. And so Simone and I just typed into the chat our names and our email addresses, and so that you can find us through that.
Yeah, and if you are listening, because I know not everybody can read or not accessible through the chat box, mine is S as in Sam, A, M as in Mary, O, R, N as in Nancy, at careerunicorns with an S.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. That's Samorn, S-A-M-O-R-N, Salim, S-E-L-I-M. And you can easily find me on LinkedIn and message me there as well.
And I am Suzanne, SUSANNE, at SUSANNEARONOWITZ.com. Let's see, are there other questions that are on people's minds? I know that we are at the top of the hour, but we're happy to answer questions if there are any.
Yeah, while we're waiting for questions, I just want to again remind everybody that I recognize that this is a scary time. Change by itself is scary, and there's often resistance to change, even when it's good for us. And when we see that there's a global crisis going on, both from a virus health perspective as well as a economic impact, and when we hear on the news all the time about people who are infected and dying and losing their jobs, it can be a very scary time. But I also want to remind us that even though people like Prince Charles is infected, or the people that we admire or care about are infected, that there is a lot of hope. We see companies like Louis Vuitton and others transitioning their perfume factories to do hand sanitizers instead. We see people like myself, where in a small way I'm helping this person who doesn't have work and can't have groceries be able to have 2 months of groceries, or keeping my home daycare providers hopefully open for the next year until they can get some relief from the loans from the federal government. And so, or in Suzanne's case, she's purchasing gift cards from her local favorite stores just to help keep them afloat. Or in this case with the webinar, this was literally something I talked to the ABA about last Friday maybe, and we got something together by Monday, and 150 people signed up. So there's a lot of things that you can do that's in your control that can still be very valuable and very helpful. And just to remind yourself that there's so much good in this world. There's so much love and compassion that you can have for yourself, for your neighbors, for your community, for the world. And there's a lot that you can still do, and remind yourself of the good that is still here.
So there's a question about dealing with childcare and homeschooling needs and time conflicts when trying to work. And it's hard. It is definitely hard. First of all, I would encourage you to set realistic expectations, both for yourself and for your colleagues and your kids. You're not going to be able to do everything to the same level of perfection that you might have done before when you had all of your resources available. And so I think in just not holding yourself to an unrealistic, unachievable goal or expectation is the first thing. I have found doing the time blocking and being really clear about what time is dedicated for what can be very helpful. And I'm seeing that with other working parents in my network that has been effective. So they, one family I know of, the parents trade on and off. One of them wakes up extra early to get 2 hours of work in, while the other parent deals with the children, and then they reverse that the other day. So if you happen to be in a 2-parent household, maybe that's a strategy. Setting specific times when the homeschooling will take place and some specific times when your work will take place. I would encourage you to talk to folks in your network, whether it's other parents at your school, other colleagues of yours, and just doing the best. I know from a parenting perspective, there are some things that I've let slide that in a perfect world I might not. And so whether it's flexibility around screen time or some of those other things, just we're all doing our best to get through. Our kids are resilient. They will learn what they need to learn, and we'll all come out on the other side. So, but I do think checking in with folks in your communities to see what's working for them, and kind of crowdsource some of those ideas with people who are in a similar situation might be helpful.
Yeah, I love those ideas of crowdsourcing ideas and having some compassion for yourself, that you're not going to do things the way things are when things are normal. So our daycare closed pretty abruptly. And so we found ourselves to be mandated to work from home by our companies. We both work, my husband and I both work at tech companies, and I work with a lot of tech clients. And so I couldn't go to my office. And so for us, it's being creative, like turning my laundry room or my closet into an office space. and saying like, hey, I typically only take meetings during the afternoons. This webinars are a little bit special, so I made some special arrangements for it. But I basically wake up a little bit earlier at 4 a.m. to get some work done, like prepping for this webinar. And then I do my workout at 5:30, et cetera. And then I'm on shift from 8:30 a.m. to 1. And then I have meetings from 1 to 5. And then put the baby to bed. And then, I'm up a little bit later to get some work done. And so that's my schedule, but I've also decided that I'm going to take vacation starting tomorrow, and that's because I need it. My daycare is closed for, and I don't know how long. They hope to open in April, but my sense is it's going to be a little bit longer than that. I also know that the federal government has released some regulations saying that if you're having to take time off because of childcare or you were sick, there are some new laws coming down about paying you for this time or being able to ask employers for FMLA and things like that. So I would encourage you to also look at those regulations. They're still fairly new, so I can't say for certain what they are because, as you know, the House and Senate are still arguing about things. But there seems to be some agreement that those kinds of regulations have to be put in place. I also know that for some universities, for example, like Berkeley, they instituted this policy where if you have a young child who has to stay at home, you are allowed to take 2 weeks off paid. Uniformly, no questions asked. And so I don't know what employers are doing on that front, but that might be helpful. But I would say that regardless of whether you are a single parent or two-parent household, having some boundaries around when you're going to work, when you're going to be with the child, and then also giving the child a routine as well. So for our baby, we try to take him for a walk in the morning and the afternoon because he needs some outside time, while still keeping to social distancing, of course. And then there's time for him to read. And we bought him a little tent because he likes to go hide in there for half an hour. And I'll tell you, that half hour is the best half hour of my life, because sometimes I'm like, I just need alone time too. And so I'm reading my book on how to condo my house with Marie Kondo right now. I've read it before, but now that Jasper, my son, has taken over the house, we have a lot of his stuff that we need to get through. So you can create some quiet time where you both can do things that are valuable. He likes to do his own readings, or he likes to play with magnet tiles, and I don't necessarily need to be there for that, right? But I just am around because he needs that comfort, but I can still read my book or do something else. So finding some creative ways and understand that your child can have some independence is also key. We happen to be very lucky. We have a very small outside yard. And so I have not touched this yard for the last 7 years, and it's pretty wild. But some things that we're doing is like trying to quote unquote garden, and the baby likes to go out and play with the dirt and play with worms, and I'm just like, whatever makes you happy, kid. So that works too. So I think the danger of crowdsourcing is comparing yourself to others and saying, I'm not Instagrammable perfect. And if that's where you're at, I would say don't crowdsource and don't social media, because that's where it can be destructive. But if it's a good group, like Suzanne said, I found the Moms in Tech group on Facebook to be super helpful about these kinds of things, where people are vulnerable about how challenging it is and coming up with ideas of, hey, this is what you can do to really help yourself with that. And finding a compassionate group is super helpful.
I agree. And there was one question about the regulations you mentioned earlier and whether they cover part-time employees. And I would say we probably don't necessarily know, but we would encourage you to keep an eye on the news and to that, to focus on that, and to certainly use your legal skills to dig into that and see whether it does cover part-time employees. I don't know. Do you know, Simone?
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the laws as they stand on the regulations seem a little unclear. So what I would say is to look at your local city ordinances, because there's usually a FAQ that they'll put out, or your state ordinances. There's an FAQ page there, or even with the federal government. So go through that and try to find a section that's relevant to you. It's kind of extensive and long, so I don't have it off of my memory, but it should be something that's Googleable and you can find in a 15-minute search.
Yeah, and it looks like We don't have any new questions. I do want to be sensitive to everybody's time because folks do have to get back to work or back to whatever they were doing. And so maybe this would be a great time to thank you, Simorn, for your inspiration for this program and your generosity in pulling it together so quickly, and to thank the ABA. Hopefully everybody got something useful out of it, got a couple of tips, and even just a sense of coming together for this hour, which I have found to be incredibly helpful and valuable. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add before we turn it back over to Tracy.
Yeah, I want to echo thanking the ABA for putting this together, and Tracy, Emily, and Joshua, who are staff members who really quickly put this out to the mailing list group for them to sign up. I know there's a question about can you sign up for other seminars in the series if you're not a member? Absolutely. Just go to the ABA Career Center website and you can see the programs that we're presenting. Tracy will also mention several other programs after this when we turn it back to her. I also want to thank you, Suzanne, for jumping in really last minute. I know many of us are responding to this crisis. I am overwhelmed with so many emails and programs and running a whole bunch of other things that I'm dealing with as well. But I definitely think that one of the things I really appreciate about the ABA Career Center and our board in particular is that we really rally together. We understand that there's a crisis before us and that people are feeling scared and challenged, and we wanted to provide as much value and resources for everybody that you can implement right away, and to recognize that even in this scary time, it's okay to acknowledge those feelings, and at the same time also focus on what is in your control and your power to manage. And there's a lot of good that you can still do, and to focus on the wonderful things that humans are doing to support each other, whether it's sewing masks for doctors or going to help deliver food to the elderly, whatever that you can do to continue to know that humanity is going to be okay. And in times like these, it's when you can really learn who you can count on and rely on, and to continue to build and deepen those types of relationships and that type of love, compassion, and grace in your life. So thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And Tracy, why don't we turn it back over to you?
Great, thank you so much. Thank you, Simorn and Suzanne, for a fantastic presentation, and thank you all for attending today's program. We have upcoming Career Development Series webinars on LinkedIn, social media, and personal branding on Friday, April 17th, Demystifying Intellectual Property Due Diligence in Mergers and Acquisition Transactions on June 12th, Technology is the Future, How Legal and Operations Can Innovate Together on July 10th, and How to Break into Diversity and Inclusion in the Legal Profession on August 14th. For information on our next Career Development Series programs, visit our website, americanbar.org/career center. If you're looking for a 30-minute overview of a practice area, check out our Career Choice series. We have an upcoming program on building virtual law practice for the modern day client on May 1st, election law on May 29th, and white collar crime on July 17th. For program information, updates, and more, connect with us on social media. Lastly, get to know more about who helps make these programs possible by checking out our Career Center board on our About page. Before you go, please complete our short survey. Thanks again, and have a great weekend, everyone.